Doubles and coffee. Things getting real. When Kamla Prasad Bissessa recently asked the PNM, who letting the cocaine pass? Where did some of your financiers get all your money from? Why is the PNM so vehemently opposed to protecting Trinidad and Tobago, to stopping the flow of guns, drugs, ammunition, human trafficking, to stopping narco-terrorism? When Kamla Prasad Bissessa asked those questions, you all have to understand that she's the head of the National Security Council. As Christopher Rowley said, the former, when you're the head of the National Security Council, you get more information than the regular citizen. Kamla Prasad Bissessa asked those critical questions, but the PNM fake news media, supported by PNM fake news financiers, let it pass. Just like somebody let the cocaine pass. David Michael Rudder, go and listen to his song. Go and listen to his Kaiso. Who letting the cocaine pass? It reminds me now of another song by Simon and Garfunkel, Songs of Silence. Somebody is very silent. All of a sudden, silent. This verbal abuser, this oppressor, this tyrannical dictator, this concoctor of positions, this arrogant imbecile is all of a sudden silent. Go and play Simon and Garfunkel, the Songs of Silence. Let me read for you, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, from a court document in New York, the indictment of Nicolas Maduro as a narco-terrorist, head of a drug cartel, drug runner, money launderer, human trafficker. Let me read a bit, just a little bit, from the indictment, and all of y'all should read the entire indictment, and then you would understand who the PNM was supporting. When you see celebrations blasting out across the entire world with Venezuelans singing and chanting and dancing because of freedom, that freedom is possible because of hope for a return to the Venezuela of old, you must ask yourself, how come Venezuelans happy, but the PNM vexed, but the PNM angry, but the PNM still defending Maduro, Delcy Rodriguez, Astrobal Chavez, and the illegitimate regime of Nicolas Maduro? Why? Ask yourself why. And other Caribbean prime ministers, I ain't dealing with all you today, but some of all you wanted to attack Kamla and defend Maduro. Why? Well, let me read this, and some of y'all may understand why. In the indictment against Nicolas Maduro in the court of law, approved and agreed on by a grand jury, so too were politicians along the Caribbean route, corrupted by cocaine traffickers who would pay them for protection from arrest and to allow favored traffickers to operate with impunity as they traffic cocaine from Venezuela north towards the United States. Well, we are north of Venezuela, very close. The Gulf of Paria, all drug boats and transshipment pass through Trinidad and Tobago. Kamla Prasad Bissessa joined with the USA to stamp that out, because the guns and the ammunition that accompanied the drugs and the human trafficking were coming into our land and getting into the hands of our young people, who were killing themselves and killing others by the hundreds per year. Who letting the cocaine pass? We are north. Who are these politicians who are closing their eyes? Trinidad and Tobago. I went fishing at least 14 times and did videos for y'all between 2020 and 2025. And I showed you all of our naval assets parked up, not patrolling. I showed you the Gulf of Paria open. No air guard, no helicopter, the radar not functioning, no diesel for the vessels, vessels broken down, others parked up, and I kept asking you all why. Why are our borders porous? Who leaving them open? Who allowing the drugs and the cocaine and the human traffickers to pass? I kept showing you all and asking you all. Let me read for you. So too were politicians along the Caribbean route, corrupted by cocaine traffickers who would pay them for protection from arrest and to allow favored traffickers to operate with impunity as they trafficked cocaine from Venezuela north towards the United States of America. David Rudder Calypso is truth, who letting the cocaine pass. Then we hear now, as this indictment goes on, an action taking place in Venezuela. No war and no panic, as some people tried to put onto the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, as Kamala Persad-Bissessar led us competently and calmly. Now some people silent. Can you hear the sounds of silence? Can you hear the sounds of silence? Who's missing? In the words of the famous Sesame Strong, one of these things don't fit here. Who's silent? How come they're silent now? Where's the former? The former who called a press conference, advertised his press conference, and the media went to alert Maduro of what to hit, what assets to hit up Trinidad and Tobago. The most illogical, unpatriotic press conference ever in the midst of raging conflict between USA and Venezuela. The former tried to dump Trinidad and Tobago in the middle, came out with press conference, sending messages to Maduro and his narco-terrorist clan who were threatening Trinidad and Tobago, and Trinidad and Tobago was not doing them anything. Where's that former? Where the press conference? Where the microphone? Where the arrogance? This former. Now, after spreading panic and being assisted by his former and the current, soon-to-be former leader of the PNM, the former has gone silent. But this Rowley, this former, this man, let me ask you all a question. He coveted power so much. He coveted to be the leader of the PNM. He coveted to be in control of the treasury since 1995, that he went and he attacked Patrick Manning. He went for leadership. He went hard to take it over and lost in 1995. Manning didn't get rid of him for whatever reason, I don't know. But he survived and he came back. And from 2007 to 2010, waged a war against Patrick Manning, attacking him, talking about corruption with cold heart, and all of this attacks on Patrick Manning, bringing him down. Kamala Persad-Bissessar and her People's Partnership rising to power, and out of the ashes rose Rowley to be the leader of the PNM, lying on Patrick Manning to be leader. He became leader of the PNM. Then he lied on Kamala Persad-Bissessar and her cabinet ministers and security advisors with email gate, the biggest lies ever perpetrated on a parliament in the English-speaking Caribbean. Email gate. Then in 2015, when the election, he was losing and the PNM machinery was saying we are losing. The PNM EBC granted an extra hour for the PNM machinery alone to operate without advising the UNC about the extra hour of voting time. And he scraped through and stole another victory. Then this same former in 2020 lies through COVID press conference every day, and some of y'all believe the lies that they were handling this COVID thing so well and they were number one in the world. All nonsense. People were suffering. People were oppressed. They couldn't come home. And they called an election in the midst of COVID with 35,000 voters from marginal constituencies locked out, not coming back. And only ones who could come back was from party group this one and PNM party group that one, connected straight to Stuart Smallpin Young, the former. And they squeaked out an election victory by 2,638 votes in 2 seats. And this former then led with arrogance, using the parliament as his own personal football field, with a blue-haired lady and a next one in the Senate, kangaroo, oppressing the voice of the opposition, taking decisions arbitrarily, shattering the economy, the most recusals in history, the porous borders. This man coveted power and had power, and then all of a sudden disappeared for 27 days in the United States of America. Nobody knew where he was, what he was doing. There was no information on his daily meetings, where he was moving. He was in California, then he was in Washington, then he went back to California. And a prime minister of a country going AWOL, away without leave. Then a few months later, he started to signal that he was about to quit. After all these meetings in the United States of America, after meetings and interrogations that we have no information on who, what, where, why, when. But suddenly this man who had coveted power, who had lied for power, who had cheated for power, who was now in charge of the treasury and recusing himself, and his ministers and his financiers were getting rich, and he was weaning the population of their resources, and all the resources were going in coffers that he favored financiers, favored people, favored ministers, were all collecting. You now hearing at HDC that one former minister and MP collect 300 million. He was in charge. He had fought for 25, 30, 29 years from 1995 to be in that position. And then, just so, he up and quit. This man who coveted power, who has nothing else in his life but to be in power and control the money of Trinidad and Tobago, he just quit. No reason given. Just shortly after 27 days in the United States of America, this former just up and quit. But he didn't just want to up and quit. He needed to select his own mini-me, to stay there, to seek his interests. He couldn't leave it alone. He fought the PNM. He went against the PNM constitution. He cussed out parliamentarians. He cussed out the general council to leave his mini-me there because he couldn't and didn't want to give up power. And then after his mini-me lost, this former who said he quit and tired of politics and going to love up his loving wife is seen more than when he was prime minister, calling more press conference than ever. But now, when Nicolas Maduro in the USA hands being interrogated, information being sought, and the indictment, information and evidence on this is being sought by law enforcement officials in the United States of America, Nicolas Maduro is under interrogation, and part of the indictment states, so too were politicians along the Caribbean route, corrupted by cocaine traffickers who would pay them for protection from arrest and to allow favored traffickers to operate with impunity as they trafficked cocaine from Venezuela north towards the United States. And with all this, the former is silent. Rowley, why you silent? Talk now, Rowley. Come on, Rowley. We know you so long. We don't know you to be silent. We know you to be buffing, arguing, oppressive, dictatorial, disrespectful. But where the monkey put the nuts? Where the monkey put the cocaine? Talk, former, waiting for the former prime minister press conference. Are waiting for your press conference. How you so quiet on what's going on in Venezuela? How you so quiet about your boy Nicolas Maduro when you were the #1 supporter of Nicolas Maduro, #1 in the world supporter of Nicolas Maduro? How you gone quiet now, former? Talk now, boy. The rest of all you, bless.